Hello and welcome to the Nitty Gritty Writing Podcast. I'm Simon Cantan.
And I'm Dave Higgins.
And in this episode, we're going to be talking about the tools we use to write books. But before we do that, we'll do our usual weekly update. And Dave, you can go first.
Right. Another episode of Seven Stones, written, drafted, edited, polished, and published. I've finished the redraft of Origin, the first book in Dragons and Magic, following our post-beta reader discussion of what changes we might want to make. So that's now hopefully even more brilliant than the already brilliant thing it was to begin with. Apart from that, with the Brexit results and a couple of other random things that have happened, it's been a fairly arduous week. So I haven't managed to really get anything else done because I haven't been in the best of headspaces for sitting down and writing enjoyable fiction.
Good answer. For me, I have other reasons for not having written very much. I've written about 7,500 words of the post-apocalyptic book when I was meant to write 15. Part of the reason is that I was kind of stuck for how it was going to go next. So I've mentioned numerous times now that I outline a bit and then write a bit and then outline a bit and then write a bit. So I've opened so many threads that I was trying to come up with a way that I can close them all in a satisfying way and as close to the end as possible. So I don't know if people have read, but at least what I've read in writing books and stuff like that is the closer together things are at the ending. So there's like an exterior, like an external world, either victory or failure. And there's usually a character victory or failure. And the closer you get them together, possibly the same event doing both or something close together, the more emotional impact it has on the reader at the end, the more satisfying it is for them, or gut-wrenching if it's a tragedy. So I was trying to come up with a way that the four main characters could all have their the ends of their arcs meet at the same place, which I think I've now accomplished in my head. It's not written yet. So there's that, and then my day job. We've been using, this is going to be pro techie speak for a second, but we've been using something called AspNet, which is a fairly old-fashioned kind of technology now. And we're moving over to MVC and jQuery and JavaScript and HTML5. So all of which means that I now have to relearn everything. Like all the programming, like some of the programming stuff I'm doing is still relevant, like the basic stuff, but the structure around it all needs to be completely relearned, which means I need to watch lots and lots of Microsoft lectures, which is lots of fun. So that's been a lot of my free time doing that. So that's why I haven't written as much. But this week or next week, from now, I have a holiday week. So I'm going to try and finish the post-apocalyptic book by next Saturday. Hopefully I'll do it. That's when the deadline is for the bundle anyway. So if I don't do it by then it's not going to be in the bundle. So yeah, we crack on with our topic. So I thought what we could do is start from idea generation in terms of tools, what we use for that, and work our way through the process, kind of mentioning each tool we use for each different step.
Mm-hmm.
So for ideas, I always have my phone, as I guess most people have, and I just use the note application. I just have a note called Story Ideas. I take a note of anything I come up with, and then I transfer it to a Scrivener document on my PC, which is just called Ideas for Novels, and just create a new document with a new file or individual document within Scrivener for that idea. And usually it's a story idea, sometimes it's a character idea, or a world idea or something like that. How about you, Dave?
Well, I don't have a mobile phone or any of that stuff. I used to carry a notebook around to capture every single idea I had, but I ended up with vast numbers of paper notes. So I started transferring them to a note capturing app on my PC. So I was using Evernote. But again, I ended up with vast numbers of virtual notes about things. And what I was finding was that the ideas that actually I wrote were the ones that I'd had. And then they came back to me again. So I couldn't escape from this idea popping up in my head. And some of the other ideas that I had that I didn't note down and I lost came back to me again, slotted together with other ideas later, because my unconscious had still been working on them. So because I had more ideas than I could cope with, I decided to try not capturing every idea as I had it and just seeing what happened. So if an idea pops up a couple of times and I start thinking about it, then I'll start taking notes. I'll put it down somewhere in whatever I happen to feel, whatever I happen to have to hand. With my PC, I'll write some sort of document, text file, RTF, whatever. If I'm out wandering, I'll just think about it and scroll some notes on the back of a receipt. But just capture the idea in whatever form it needs to be, and let the ones that have just popped up into my head randomly that aren't connected to other ones sink down again.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's two bits to what I do. The first being that my memory, I guess, is not as good as most people's, so I would just forget them. I've even had occasions where I've been cycling, and I'm cycling somewhere where I can't stop, and I go, oh my God, that's a brilliant idea. I have to stop and put a note in my phone as soon as I'm out of traffic. And then I get out of traffic and go, oh, I have no idea what that idea was. I know it was great, but I have no idea what it is. So it's gone forever. So for me, I need to note them down, otherwise I forget them. But for a lot of people, it seems like, yeah, as you say, just letting them percolate may kind of bring up the best ones anyway.
Yeah, well, I worked for longer than I'd actually like to think about, because it's a scarily big number, doing court cases. So you get the file, and then you'd read the file through, and then you'd need to argue potentially 2 or 3 years worth of litigation in real time. So you couldn't like go away and refer to your notes and come back in 5 or 10 minutes. You had to be able to spot in your opponent's argument that there was something there you needed to comment on, because it gelled with something that was 2/3 of the way into a file that you'd read on the train that morning. So my mind is very good, potentially a lot better than most people's, at holding a huge amount of stuff in a buffer. So it is, my process does potentially work better for me, because if I have an idea when I'm on my way to the shops, I can walk around the shops shops, not thinking about the idea, thinking about what I need to buy the stuff, wander home, put my shopping away, fuss the cats, turn my computer on, make a cup of coffee, come back, and then don't write the idea down because it's come back again because I need it now. So it's very, and yeah, note taking doesn't work for me because I'm not good at referring to notes because I'm good at remembering things. Whereas people who aren't necessarily so good at remembering things without any kind of memory aid work better potentially with notes because they're more used to needing them, so they think about looking at notes. Whereas I can have lots of notes and forget that I have notes.
Yeah. I mean, I write a shopping list because I'd forget what I was going to buy. But just when you were talking about remembering things as a barrister, like I remember long strings of digits as a computer programmer because I need to remember an account number when I used to work in the bank. So I'd need to remember 10 digits in a string. And I would memorize, 30 account numbers a day.
Yeah.
Which is not very useful, really. It's more useful to remember book ideas than it is to remember 10-digit account numbers. Anyway, so moving on to outlining then. So taking whatever you decide is the best idea for a story at that particular moment and turning it into, testing it out maybe, or turning it into something that you can see where it generally might go. And for me, that's the snowflake method, usually in Scrivener. So I've usually got an idea for a hook. That's where I tend to start from. So, for instance, with the personal gods, which has become blood cruel, there's particular people in our society that have their own personal god. And it's real, like they have a real god. And some people have a very powerful god, and some people have a very weak god. And the main character ends up with Loki as their personal god, who is, a trickster. So that was the only kind of thing I had at the start to come up with the story, which I then went, oh, well, that's a decent hook. That's something you could kind of tell someone and they go, oh, that seems like it might be interesting to read. But then I need to figure out who the main character is. Is the world ours? Is it a fantasy world? Is it a science fiction world? What are the rules of the world? What are the rules of the people who have personal gods? What can the gods do? All that kind of stuff. World building in general, kind of testing of ideas.
Since I've got Scrivener, I've found it useful for the outlining and world building bit because of the duplicate and split document functions. Is like Simon, I start off with whatever bits of idea I've got, and then I want to build them up. And the thing that Scrivener has that is purely convenience for me, rather than anything that makes the process better in and of itself, is holding things together in the same place. So I can start off with my brief idea set, note that down, I've got that, and then that will probably have maybe an idea of the story, a chunk of bit on the world that I've thought, ooh, that would be a cool bit about the world, maybe a couple of characters. So I can duplicate that, at which point I've got it in Scrivener. So it's all in one file in the same place. I don't have to worry about it being in two places. Then I can split that document into several chunks. So I can split it into the what was my original idea, this bit is world building, this bit is characters. And then if, for example, it's a basic hook that I've split out of that first ideas document, I can label that basic hook, and I can duplicate it again, and then expand the basic hook up. And Scrivener's keeping it all together in the same place, so again, I don't have to worry about losing it. And I've got that original hook that I can refer back to if I want to. I don't have to worry about accidentally over-typing the wrong thing. And then I can turn the hook up into a basic outline, and then you can duplicate the basic outline, split it, and depending on how long the story is and how easily the idea comes together, I can either come up with a basic outline for a short story, some characters, some world, and so on, or I can keep expanding that out and then take a chunk of the outline and copy that out into another document that I can expand into a chapter outline or a section outline or whatever. And because it's always in the same place, I can just click if I want to go back and look at a different level or one of my earlier ideas documents, because I'm thinking, I'm not sure about this. What was my initial plan? I just click, see a different document. I can even split the screen and have them next to each other.
Mm.
And so that sort of that ability to break the document into pieces. So if you have a sudden idea, it's like you're halfway through outlining chapter 3 and suddenly you have a great idea for chapter 4. You can whack out your idea for chapter 4 in rough straight away, and then go back, finish up chapter 3, and then just split that document into 2, rather than having to worry about noting it down and then having to go back to copy paste manually. So it's not something that you can't do with other tools, but just having everything in the same place and just being able to use a keyboard shortcut to go, okay, now I want that to be 2 documents instead of 1, just that little bit quicker. So it's just another little thing that I don't have to think about that isn't the task I'm actually supposed to be achieving, in this case, outlining.
Yep. So the other thing I was going to mention is, in terms of outlining, is folder structure. So this is kind of a mundane point, I guess, but I have an ideas folder where I've made kind of Scrivener files that just have a kind of very basic details. Then I have 2 folders, one called Hot List, I think, or Hot Ideas or something like that. And the other one is called Hot List and Cooling. So Hot List means these are ideas that I am currently excited about writing. And Cooling is ones where I was previously excited about writing them, but I'm kind of gone off them. So I may go back to them eventually, but I've come up with, I had the hook, I came up with the world, and I went, no, I don't like it as much as I used to, and I put it in the Cooling folder. So then if I want to, I can go back and have a look and see what used to interest me. Like, for instance, I had one about a social worker, where that was the entire point of the book, was about a social worker. So social worker helping people who have drug addiction or emotional or psychological issues and need help, and that was it. That was the extent of. I tried to come up with ideas and stuff, and then I went, no, this is going in the Cooling folder because I don't know how to make this interesting. So that was kind of a little kind of point. It can be helpful just to have folder structure that suits the way you work and allow yourself to kind of because what you don't want is a big folder with a huge list of Scrivener files, all of them like, you know, ideas you've kind of started and then stopped. You need to kind of give yourself a mental structure to say, these are the ones I'm still interested in writing at some stage. These are the ones I tried out and I just couldn't come up with. And these are the ones I haven't even thought of a way to try them out yet.
Yeah.
So then we go on to writing, which I think it's just Scrivener, so we can. One thing I can mention on that is still on folder structure is that I do a day backup of, I create a new folder in Google Drive for every day that I write with the day's date in it. And the reason I do that is that Dropbox deleted over 1,000 of my story novel files one day back in 2014, I think, or 15.
Yeah.
Yeah, and suddenly all of the contents of my novels had disappeared. And it took them over 6 months, I think it was about 9 months before they could recover the files. So the advantage was I was using Scrivener, and Scrivener automatically takes backups all the time. It's constantly taking backups. So as long as you've used it, it's taken a backup on a computer. And since I was using it on my work laptop, my work desktop, my home desktop, I had loads of backups so I could recover. But after that happened, I went, okay, well, that's never going to happen again. So even though I switched to using Google Drive, I don't trust any of the syncing services. So I created a new folder with the day's date. I copy all the files from the previous day into the folder with the day's date. And then I know that I have an entire history of everything that's been worked on, along with Scrivener's backups, along with an actual backup that runs every night on my computer. So that's, backups of backups of backups, just to make absolutely sure, because a novel is not something you want to lose. Someone mentioned the self-publishing podcast guys are going to make a writing tool where everything is stored in the cloud. And the first questions people asked were, okay, but where's the physical file? And can I save it? Because that's, if you're working on a novel and spending hundreds of hours, you don't want it to disappear. So anyway, yeah, writing in Scrivener for the most part. I guess the same for you, Dave.
Yeah, definitely my first drafts are in Scrivener, because again, I can duplicate a chunk of the outline, and if I feel like expanding that, or I can split the screen and have the outline next to a blank document and write from that. So
that's definitely what I do. I split the screen and have the outline on the left and the writing on the right.
Yeah, so then you can swap back in. Again, it's one of those things where previously I could do it by having 2 different windows open on my desktop. So it's a convenience more than a necessity. But again, having it all in the same place, it just keeps things a little bit tidier. I know where everything is. But yeah, Scrivener's good for that. And I keep my backups on a separate hard drive that I just use for storing things, which doesn't give me as much space necessarily as the cloud. Doesn't give me that ability to look at all of my backups from wherever I am. But it does give me the advantage that if the internet goes down, I can still work. I'm not reliant on being connected to anything. And if I know I'm going to be away from my desk for some time and I'll be working somewhere else, I can transfer a copy of the backup to one of the cloud syncing accounts, use my laptop for that. So again, for me, it's more useful for me to be proofed against the internet going down than it is for me to be able to work in multiple locations, because I don't work in an office, work from my desk at home, and carry a laptop to various sites. But Scrivener does seem to work reasonably well for both. And there are some people do get the occasional niggle, but I've never had a problem with using syncing with a cloud backup, apart from some of the files that Simon mentioned disappearing were things we'd co-authored. So having a large chunk of Green Star go missing was a little bit
We could mention as well, though, we have had the occasional little hiccup with Google Drive where it says this file is currently being edited by blah.
Yeah.
And the other person isn't editing it.
Yeah, it takes the message that I get on the corner of my screen saying that Google Drives has finished syncing isn't actually the moment when it's finished syncing for everyone who has access to that folder on the drive. So there are sort of, I think it's been up to half an hour after I've finished doing something, because there have been a couple of times when one of us has mentioned to the other that in an email or conversation or whatever that they've just finished something and saved it to the shared folder, and the other one goes to look at it and it says, well, it's being edited by this person, or it was the document is shown as the most recent copy being several days ago, so obviously it's not picking up straight away. But that's more of a problem, I think, for collaboration than working on your own stuff.
Well, collaboration, or if you're using two PCs of any kind.
I suppose yes. If you I suppose if you do something at work, save it to your drive, and then go home, and because you know that once you relax, you won't get back into it, the first thing you do when you walk through the door is open up your home computer and get to work on it. So yeah, it could be slightly desynchronized.
And the risk is as well that then Google Drive says, well, then this is the last updated version, because it has a later date. So the thing I do, at least, is the day backups, as I say, and then if there's something I'm sending over to Dave, I'll create a new folder or a new file to send it, because then it's either there or it's not. Whereas if I edit the one that's already there, then it could be an old version of the same file. Whereas if it's a new file entirely, well, then it can't be. So yeah, that's syncing. Whilst writing, these are kind of, most people will know already. Thesaurus.com and dictionary.com, obviously very useful. Google image search. If you've got a place or a person that suddenly comes up, I always do a Google image search and then copy a random image of a place or a person into my Word document for that thing. And then what I've started doing on this book is trying to write a text, a narrative description of the thing in the Word document. So instead of like going to the story and then going, this new guy walked up and his name was Doug and he was so tall and had brown hair, I go to the Word document, I try and write a paragraph, like 5 sentences about that person, and then I pick out the ones I like the best out of what I've written and use that to say, you know, what do we have in Origin? The first chapter of Origin, her hair looked like it had been combed by crows, I think was one of the descriptions that I then picked out and put in. So yeah, that's quite useful. Fantasy name generator. I think it's fantasynamegenerator.com. I'll just double check. Fantasy name generators with an s.com. All one word, no hyphens or anything. that's the best name generator I've found, because it can generate names of anything. It can generate names of real people from all the different countries of the world. It can generate place names of all kinds of different things. It can generate fantasy names, not just Tolkien-esque kind of fantasy, but like anything at all. Aliens and any aliens, dragons, robots, pirates, all kinds of stuff. So that's a really, really useful website. Yeah, so then we're on to, so we've written our book, so we're on to editing. So that's where we actually start using MS Word. I think both Dave and I both use MS Word for editing.
Amongst other things, yes.
The reason I use MS Word is because I use Pro Writing Aid, and that only has a Word plugin. It doesn't have a Scrivener plugin. So Pro Writing Aid is a spelling and grammar checker that's way better than Microsoft Word's built-in grammar checker, and better than Grammarly, which is the only other one. I've used a couple of others, but yeah, Grammarly is the main one as well that most people know about. So at this stage, after writing a number of books, Grammarly would catch maybe one thing per chapter, whereas Pro Writing Aid would tend to catch maybe 20 things a chapter, and they're usually not spelling errors that like Microsoft Word would catch. They're usually you should consider writing this in this way. So one that I keep doing is the forest around them, and it says the surrounding forest, because it's just a more compact way to write the same thing. So that's obviously choice. If you've just written the surrounding trees, the surrounding forest would be clunky, but it gives you kind of options and things. Or it also mentions, you've used this word quite often in a row. How about you switch it? Which is something I tend to do a lot. I get hung up on some word and keep you reusing it. So how about you, Dave? You mentioned there was other things than MS Word.
My approach to editing is that one of the biggest obstacles to redrafting your own work, editing your own work, doing anything to your own work is that you're close to it. So you know what you meant to say. So it's very easy for part of your mind to fill in the blanks or to glide over things that don't quite work, because when you read your own writing back, it's an aid memoir almost for what you were thinking of when you wrote it, which isn't something that readers get. So I like to trick my mind into thinking it's not the thing it wrote. One of the easiest ways to do that is to change the display of it. Whilst it's not something that necessarily readers consciously notice, if you change the typography of a page, it has an unconscious effect. So I like to write the first draft in Scrivener and then edit, or redraft, depending on what you want to call that next stage, in OpenOffice, because it's got different margins, different font, different layout, and so forth. So my brain doesn't think, oh, it's the same document, the one we wrote 2 months ago, or whatever. And then go through the whole process in OpenOffice. And I prefer OpenOffice to MS Word because I find it easier to create bespoke dictionaries in OpenOffice. potentially just because that's where I learned to do it. And it would be easier in MS Office if I looked up how to do it and practiced it. But for things where there are a number of equally valid words, so for instance, compound words, where sometimes it's 2 words, sometimes it's hyphenated, and sometimes it's 1 word with no hyphen or space. And they're equally valid, but you need to be consistent. So I like to create a dictionary just for that, so that as well as picking up spelling errors, it picks up that I've used on board with a hyphen, on board without a hyphen. So that lets me know, well, you haven't been consistent there. So I can just go through and fix it all to the whichever one I've chosen is the one I'm going to use. So that makes that. And then once I've edited, once I've rewritten in OpenOffice, I'll look at it in MS Word next time, because if you open a document, if you create a document in OpenOffice, save it as a doc file, and then open that doc file in MS Word, it opens with different margins, different spacing, subtly different points about it. So that gets me another free tricking my brain into thinking this is someone else's work rather than mine. And also, I like MS Word as the last stage because it's easiest to collaborate on track changes. So if it's something I'm working on with Simon, or if it's something I want to send to an editor, or if it's something that I'm editing for someone else, having MS Word as the last step lets me export in the most popular format.
I think, I found something in the last year or year and a half, which is probably something similar, which is I go into a chapter in Scrivener and I split it into little sections. And each section is about 150, 200 words. And then I edit those sections a little at a time. And that's just a psychological trick for me, at least, which is just, well, it's only 150 words. I can edit that easily enough. And then eventually you do enough of them that it becomes an entire novel. Whereas if you look at a 2,500 or 3,000 word chapter, you're going, oh God, this is going to take forever. So yeah. So then that's editing dealt with. So then publishing. We went into GIMP on a previous podcast, only 5 or 6 podcasts ago, for doing covers. Obviously, that's the last resort. It's better to have a graphic designer, but GIMP is very, very good for a free product. They were saying it's competitive with Photoshop now. Otherwise, I use Scrivener to create all my files, EPUB, MOBI, PDF, stuff like that, and then upload them all the different places. But you use a different program.
I do. The Scrivener outputs an acceptable version of all of the file types that you'll want for uploading to retailers. So Scrivener is, if you've got Scrivener anyway, then, and you don't want to think about typography, the Scrivener product using their automated generators is good. But if you want to tweak little things, so if you care about the way things break, if you really care about the line spacing, if you want your little fleurons and section breaks to scale more smoothly, if you want to deal with some of the little niggly compatibility issues that some really old tablets have, then it's might possibly worth making your own. And I actually like making ebooks. Potentially it's a little bit of, I like the idea of the ebooks I'm making working slightly better than the default on some of the obscurer machines. And it's partially just that I like making ebooks because it's an aesthetic thing for me. But I usually use Sigil to create the basic ebook because it's faster than hand coding all of the HTML myself. And then once I've created an ebook in Sigil, I'll go back in and fiddle with the code myself and optimize it and strip it down. Is the one downside of anything that automates steps for you is that a machine doing things won't necessarily do it in the most efficient manner for this specific instance. It will do something that works for everything. So it will decide, well, we need to know what things are. So it will create a class for everything. But potentially you won't need everything to have a class, because you don't need a chapter 1 class and a chapter 2 class and a chapter 3 class if all of your chapters are the same. So I like going through and doing it with Sigil and then manually editing the output of Sigil to be a little bit tighter. It does produce a slightly smaller file that comes out potentially with a slightly greater chance of not throwing a niggle if you've got a really obscure device. Because some of the really old e-readers have a different tolerance for odd code. So the really old Kindles can't handle some of the things that the really new Kindles love. So your automated Scrivener output will look good for most of them, but there are ways you can make a file that will look slightly better. But it's very much a trade-off. I hand code more than potentially is necessary to produce a good-looking product because I like it.
And that's the key thing as well. That if you don't enjoy that, you'd be better off either getting someone else to format it. I think you would offer that service, don't you, Dave?
I do offer that service. If people want something that's if they want something that's a little bit obscure, they want their book to do something that doesn't seem to work coming out of the Scrivener output, then I offer that. So yes, it's what you want to do. Yes, Scrivener, and you can also, there's Calibre, which is an ebook management program which is free, which I have used.
It works at this Calibre. If you take an EPUB from Scrivener, so you output directly to EPUB from Scrivener, and then convert it to a Mobi, it creates a much smaller Mobi than Scrivener does.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a less techy way of doing things. The thing, I was just fetched a couple of paperbacks there. I was going to show. I don't know if this is going to show up at all. So this is what Dave formatted. It seems, is it back to front for you as well, or is it the right way?
Oh, that's the right way around for me.
Okay, just back to front for me. So that's what Dave created. So that's him going in and doing stuff properly. And then this is me just outputting directly from Scrivener. I don't know if you can see that there. So I don't know if you can see, it is much nicer, much nicer formatting. It's very difficult to see on a camera, I guess. I'll try and hold both of them up.
Yeah,
so you can see that the margins and the placement and things like that are much better in Dave's version, and that's kind of an extension of what Dave does for the ebooks as well.
Yeah, I do. I offer both if people want that. It's if you like doing it anyway, it's potentially worth doing, both for the pure enjoyment and for having that little bit of pride in knowing that you put as much of your skill as you can into this. But and when you consider the popularity of pulp books, the old tatty ones that you can get for 25 pence in a secondhand bookshop or whatever, or that sell for a couple of quid new from a bookshop, where it's terrible paper, it's not brilliantly laid out, where they've gone, here's the story, smacked it onto the paper in a way that's readable, but they haven't put hours of work into it. Those still sell well. So again, it's a do I want to spend my time on this, or do I want to spend my money to hire someone else's time to do it? Or am I happy enough? Because what I really want to do is move on to writing the next story.
Yeah, and I would say that a caveat to it as well is that if you do the custom formatting, if you go in and edit everything and you want to do changes later for whatever reason, either you found some spelling errors or you want to change the call to action at the back of the book or anything like that, then you've suddenly created a lot more work for yourself. Whereas if you've done it in Scrivener, it's another click of the compile button and you've got a new version of the same almost okay looking kind of file, which is why I wouldn't do, like, I'm a programmer, so I can do the HTML, but I wouldn't bother. For me, it's good enough, but you know, you can get it looking nicer. It does. I agree, it looks nicer. I just don't agree that it's enough for me to spend the effort.
The effort for me to change things isn't that large compared to the pleasure of it looking a little bit better when I finished it. So we're both trading off. I think we value different things.
Yeah, and part of it as well is I spend my whole day looking at HTML. I can do without doing it.
Yeah, I suspect if I built websites for a living, I'd care less about optimal things, or I'd create my own bespoke automated conversion program.
Yeah, I mean, I won't. I'm not going to do it. I won't do it. I refuse.
I know some people who have created things themselves.
Yeah,
they're programmers and they really love process, so they build their own tools from scratch, and that works for them.
Well, one thing this is onto programming more than writing, but there's a new thing called RESTful APIs, or it's new to me, I guess. It's been around for a few years. And RESTful APIs are standard ways of contacting services. Like if you want, you could make your own Twitter client, and you can get out your tweets and put them up in your own client, so it's formatted the way you want them and stuff like that. So potentially people who are making, I know a number of people who are making apps for writers could do them as RESTful APIs, and then someone could create a client that combines all these different apps into one client. So you could have all these different good ideas like formatting services and things like that.
Mm.
Obviously, you'd have to have memberships or subscriptions or whatever to all these different things. But like I was thinking of the editing tools. Imagine if you could have one document and all the different editing tools came in and gave their 2 cents on it. But that's, that's into programming. We don't need to go into that too much.
I think that definitely something where you've got a machine running something that pulls in your Scrivener or whatever, and then editing opens it with a different setted layout and and then does your compile using whatever you've come up with and lets you essentially open the HTML for the compile or not as you choose. Yeah, that could be useful, but
it's potentially a lot of different services that need to talk to one another, and if they all use this RESTful API thing,
yeah,
which, as I say, is now kind of a standard way of, like, Facebook and Twitter and Google and Amazon and all of them use the same standard, so it would make things much easier. But that's completely an aside. It's not really writing. Was there anything else then? So we've now published our ebook or Mobi.
Yeah, and there are some services out there that aggregate some of the dashboards for various major retailers, which I've tried free samples for them, and I haven't found anything that's worth a subscription compared to the amount of time it takes me to go through the dashboards myself. So
yeah, I mean, it's something I've considered myself. So I'm doing my whole little app thing.
Yeah.
That if I could hook in, as I said, Amazon use a RESTful API. If I could hook into their API and just suck out the sales data from there and from Kobo and from Smashwords and wherever else, and put it all into a nice little report just for myself, would be useful. Obviously, then if I can get it, good enough, I can release it to more than just me. But that's kind of a future idea. It's nothing. The writing needs to come first.
It's things that sort of. It's the price it charges for it, I think. It's not, and definitely being able to have something that runs in the background, or a job that runs once a day, or even press a button to run it, would be more useful than having to do it manually. But the amount of time it takes to do it manually isn't huge.
No, I mean, I do it manually at the moment. So I take all the sales from different spreadsheets and things, put it into my system, and type it in manually into text boxes. It takes me maybe 10 minutes a month. It's not like, if the subscriptions, I think I've seen 1 or 2 of them are like $10, $20 a month, and you're like, okay, well, no, that's not worth 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's about it. Is there anything you wanted to add, Dave?
The beta reading doohickey that you've built, that's a writing tool.
Yeah, I wasn't going to bring that up yet because I'm still trying to perfect it. So it's not really there for public consumption. So what I'm considering now is converting it into a JavaScript reader, because the reader, so it's a beta reading tool, so it has a reader for the book, and the reader for the book at the moment with the version we just used is a fixed height and width, so that's not very pleasant for people to read. It doesn't adapt to the size of their screen. You can't zoom in and zoom out and all that kind of stuff. So if I do that using slightly better technologies in the background, I might be able to get it so that they can have on a mobile phone, it'll show up like that, and they can do the expand thingy, and it'll zoom in or zoom out, and That would be nicer if I can get that to work. So that's still, I would say the beta reading thing is still probably autumn by the time it'll come out, because as I say, writing is priority number one, and I've got tons of writing to do. The post-apocalyptic book, by the way, I've now thought of the ideas for the second and third in the trilogy, even though the first one isn't finished yet. So yeah, lots of writing to do. So yeah, is there anything else, or we'll wrap it up?
No, and that's my process.
Cool. Thank you all very much for watching, and we will see you on the next one.
Bye for now.